The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast and Ordinary People's Extraordinary Stories. I've got a great guy on today, so without too much further ado, let's bring him in. Derick, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me, Tim.
Oh no, you're most welcome. So, Derick, can you tell me when and where you were born? Can you describe to me what it was like where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received? So, the square's yours.
Yes, for sure. Thank you. So I was originally born in Fort Stewart, Georgia, which is in the United States. It's a army base, and my father was Army at the time. He did 25 years, and my mother, she's German. She was a kindergarten teacher. So I grew up in Germany, actually. So when I was born in Fort Stewart, a few months later, we moved to Germany. So we lived on an army base called Kadebach, which is near Ansbach and near Nürnberg. Americans will say Nuremberg. So my mother's family is all from Nuremberg. So born in Fort Stewart, Georgia, on an army base in the States. A few months later, moved to Germany. And then we lived there until I was in third grade. Then third grade, we moved back to the States. And then throughout middle school and college, I lived all throughout the state of Florida. So in regards to schooling, I went to kindergarten in Germany, and then I was in regular schools in the United States, not on military bases. I was in normal public schools. And then in college, I went to the University of West Florida, where I studied exercise science and psychology.
Wow. So you've had a busy little career then.
Oh yes, for sure. So with the career and everything, I did 5 years in the US Army, and then I did 5 years in the Army National Guard. So basically active duty first for 5 and then 5 for guard. So every month in the state of Florida, we would have drill and field training. And then also if there was a hurricane, any storms like that, we would help out the community with all that. So that was all during college. So I was doing a little bit of both.
Brilliant. Well, we'll come on to that, but let's take you right back. So you were born in Georgia.
Yes, correct.
On a military base. So you started off as a pad brat then.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Can you remember much about that time, or was that just before you were old enough?
I was only a few months alive. So from there we moved to Germany. So my first memory of my baby years or childhood years was definitely throughout Germany with my meine deutsche Familie.
Ich bin Ausländer, nicht verstehen.
Nicht verstehen.
Mit Pommes frites bitte. Und zwei Bier.
You're a six. You could pass as German if somebody just saw you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I learned to speak a little bit of German. You tend to lose it if you don't use it. I mean, I spent quite a bit of time in Germany, actually. My first posting was to Münster in Germany.
Oh, wow.
And
Awesome.
then we had a couple of years back in the UK, and then we went to Berlin for 2.5 years. And that
Perfect.
was
So you had
awesome.
good experiences there.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And then
Every military person that got to be stationed in or traveled through or trained in Germany, that we've all loved it.
Yes. So how long were you in Germany for?
So I was in Germany until third grade. So how old are we in third grade? I don't know the age of third graders, but I was there until third grade. And then we would bounce back and forth as in traveling. But from third grade on through college, I lived throughout Florida. And then in school, I was in Army ROTC. So in high school, did Army ROTC because I always had a vision of getting into
you're
the
rushing
military.
ahead now. So can you remember much about your time in Germany when you was a Salisbury lad?
Yes, for sure. So number one, I remember the farmland outside of the cities. I love the nature of it. I just love the cleanliness of Germany. And I love being around family, the family oriented. And also in regards to growing up with a German mother, you're naturally a professional cleaner. I like to tell my friends I have borderline OCD because of the German side. So everything has to be organized and perfect and clean and structured. So it definitely helped me. So, yes,
Mm,
definitely the overall environment I always liked in Germany. And then also how my family was very focused and driven. So, growing up, that was just natural to see on my mother's
mm.
side. And then with my father being Army as well, seeing structure and discipline on a day to day basis just always motivated me and it was natural. So I didn't really relate to my friends who had lazy parents because I didn't see that. So I just grew up around get up at 4 a.m., get up at 5 a.m., work out, and then you start your day. So that's all I
Yeah.
saw growing up.
So, with a German mother, are you bilingual? Did she
Yes, I am.
did she speak to you in German all the time, and your dad spoke to you in English? So,
Yes, that's correct. So a lot of military families, especially if the kids are mixed, they cannot communicate with their other half of the family. So mom or dad always has to play translator. So my mom, she made sure that I could speak German fluent. So if I spoke English to her at home, she would ignore me, which was good. In the moment as a kid and teenager, I was just like, oh, come on, mom. So I would have to repeat myself because I would talk for 4 minutes straight. And then she would just look at me stupid like she didn't understand me. I was like, okay, you're right. But the
oh,
older I
brilliant.
got, the more I learned that I was one of the rare ones that was a military brat, but that could talk to both sides of the family. So I didn't have to wait on the
Yeah.
translation. So I really appreciate her for doing that because a lot of people that are mixed, they can't communicate with other families. So I'm happy that that was never an issue.
So on the German side, then, so he's been up till third grade, probably pretty about 7, 8, somewhere around about, would it?
Yes. Yeah, somewhere around there.
Um, so so did you go to a German school, or did you go to the base school with the Americans?
So for pre-K, I was on base with the Americans, but for kindergarten, I was in a German kindergarten in Ansbach, Deutschland. In Ansbach,
Ah,
Germany, I was in a kindergarten there. So I made sure that I was very consistent with the German and then knew about all the different holidays and just got the full experience, especially with the Christkindlesmarkt, the Christmas market. Most
yeah.
people are very familiar with that if they visited Germany or if they haven't. We've all seen it on YouTube or in movies, but I got to experience all that with my childhood. So that showed me like my favorite part of Christmas time. I always loved it more in Germany than I did the States.
Mm. I mean, they tend to go way overboard in America, don't they, with Christmas and that. But I think the Germans are quite refined when it comes to doing Christmas and Kris Kringle and all that.
Oh,
So
yes. Full tradition.
yeah, so your elementary school, is that the next one up? Were you still in Germany at
Yes.
the start of that?
Yes. So first grade and second grade, I was in Germany, but those first 2 years of school, I was on an army base. So American teachers, American staff, some of them did speak German, but it was more so preparing you for when you move back to the States. That's
Hmm.
how, at least back then, that's how a lot of service members did it. Some of them, they take their children to kindergarten or a school outside so they can learn the language. And then if they knew that they had 1 or 2 years until they moved, they wanted to get them used to the structure before they moved. So the schooling wasn't a big culture shock.
Hmm. So can you remember much about the school then, the American school in on the base?
Yes, for sure. So I love sports growing up. So I loved that they had a track. They had a rubber track right next to the school. So essentially, there was an elementary school, there was a track, and then there was the high school. So like we got to play on the track. There's a playground there and all that. And I was just always naturally just athletic. I love sports and dealing with both parents if people are familiar with the mentality of Germans and mentality of a lot of African Americans that are military, they're very gung ho, very strict. So we bumped heads a lot. So my release was always fitness. So my
Yeah,
main thing, I loved that, and then also I was playing every sport. So football, which Americans would say soccer, I was playing
yeah.
football, and then basketball, and then also running track. So those were some of my favorites then. And then
So
it
what
was
was your
interesting before
distance?
Distance, I did 400 meters. So
400.
one lap, and I did the
Yeah.
4x4. So I was the last person to receive the baton and then have all the pressure on me. So
And how well did you do?
I did really well. I excelled. I was always the fastest one in the school. And again, I think it was just because I had all this built up tension. So my release was fitness, whether it was
Mm.
running, whether it was doing push ups, lifting weights. I just always had to release anger and aggression, whatever feeling was happening because of family stuff that just people didn't know about back then. I just used fitness as an outlet.
Mm. So, were there any lessons in your first couple of years that you didn't want to get up for, didn't want to go to school for, tried to play sick?
No, honestly, I loved going to school because I got out of the house. Like we always had a beautiful apartment, we always had a beautiful home, but there was just a lot of aggression at home. So anything that involved not being at home, I loved. So honestly, I never tried to. In America, we would say play hooky or pretend you're sick. I never did that because I was like, anything I can do to stay at school longer, to stay with my basketball coach longer, at martial arts, after school care. I would try to be away from home as long as possible. I was that kid.
Brilliant. So let's move on slightly. Moving back to the States after your dad got posted back to America, whereabouts did you end up there?
So we lived in Pensacola, Florida at the time, which is in the panhandle of Florida. It's about 2 hours from New Orleans. The best way to describe Pensacola is the white sandy beaches. There's also a massive Navy base. And also, if people go to air shows, the Blue Angels are out of Pensacola, Florida. So that's my hometown. So if you ever see those videos of the blue jets flying
Yeah,
and missing each other by centimeters, that's them. So they came from there. So we
yeah.
lived in Pensacola,
Trying to
Florida.
mimic the Red Arrows, are they?
Oh yeah. I think the Blue Angels are definitely the most entertaining. There's a lot of other groups around the world that do it, but I think that they put on the best show. They do it worldwide now as well.
Hmm. So your first school back in America, how did you get on? Was that
So
still on
I
the base or was that a local school?
it was a local public school, and with that, the transition was pretty easy because when you're on a base, you're around a lot of different type of people, different ethnicities, genders, styles, religions. That's the good thing about living on a military base. You're already used to all these different cultures. So when you live in certain parts of America, the cultures might be minimal. It might just be an all white school, might be an all black school, might be all this, all that. But I was so used to a good solid mix that I got along pretty well with anyone. So it wasn't like a culture shock from public schools going to
Mm,
private or them going to a military school where they're just like, all right, this is too much structure. It was very easy in regards to that transition.
mm. So that was that still an elementary school or was it gone to middle school?
This was elementary school. So third grade, uh, we go 3, 4, 5. So third, fourth, and fifth, that's the elementary. So that was in the same city. And then I went from there in middle school. But I lived in the same city, Pensacola, Florida at the time.
Mm. So how long were you there for?
In Pensacola, I was living there until I graduated college. So graduated college 2012. And then from there, I was active duty. And then I would travel throughout the states, throughout the world. So every three to
Mm.
6 months, we'd be somewhere else. So I wasn't stationed somewhere long term, but Pensacola was like my home base, but we would always go and travel.
All right. So what about your dad then? How had he stayed in the military or he'd left when you came back from Germany?
So he was still in the Army for the last 3 years. So he was stationed in Fort Rucker, Alabama. Nothing against the state of Alabama, but there's nothing to do there. He didn't want his family to live there, so he would come home on the weekends. So he wanted to be, we were about 20 minutes from the beach, or I'd say 30 minutes from the beach. Still a beautiful city. We had beautiful home with the pool and everything, had the whole Florida feeling, but at that time he was still in. So the first 2 to 3 years that we moved to Florida, he was still in, but he was stationed in another state. which is about 6 hours away. He just didn't want his family to be in the middle of
Mm.
nowhere. So he knew he
Yeah.
wanted to retire and live and retire in Florida.
That's quite a weekly commute, 6 hours each way.
Oh yeah.
So
And
did he?
as
So he
you
drove
know,
it, or
in
did
the
he jump on
States,
the Greyhound?
no, he would always drive his own vehicle. And in the States, honestly, road trips are very common. I've noticed that
Mm.
with a lot of my German family and German friends, or even just Europeans in general, is like for Americans, we're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to drive 5 hours to go to this concert. Europeans are like, 5 hours to go to a concert, like I'm going to get a plane ticket. So it's interesting how the driving, because we're just used to like just bigger landmass.
Yeah. England 5 hours. I mean, it can take you 5 hours just to get out of Gosport sometimes.
Yes.
I mean, just crossing London. I mean, it's a nightmare.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah. So distance. It's not really relevant.
Yeah,
It's more time
exactly.
to get somewhere.
For sure.
So moving on then to um, your middle school. How did you
Yes.
get on there? So
So
was that
in
on the
middle
same?
school,
Was that the same site as the same school as your elementary?
it was a different school, but the same city. Different school, same city. In middle school, that's where I got really serious with sports because it was more structured. The competition was on a higher level. And I also went all out in martial arts. So martial arts was like, I would always call it my zen for life. So in middle school, that's where there was a shift in the home setting.
Hmm.
Basically, drinking went up, aggression, physical and verbal went up. So martial arts became my outlet, which helped me just to be very calm. So I never
Mm.
like complained. Nobody ever knew what was going on at home. I never once complained. I just saw it as fuel. So in middle school, I would watch a lot of movies and read books of people that went through things way worse. So I'd always tell myself, dealing with drunk parents is nothing because look at these people.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't grow up in Syria. I wasn't bombed every other week. I didn't deal with this. I have all my limbs. So for me, I'm not saying this works for everyone, but for me, it always helped me to learn more extreme stories to bring me back to the current moment, to humble me and make me say, you know what, I'm grateful for this, that, this. I would just count my blessings and I would never complain. In my head, yes, I was annoyed. I was like, control your drinking. Why are you screaming like that? This is pointless, but it is what it is. So I got very serious with sports in middle
Mm.
school. But I
So
also noticed that.
what form of Jap slap did you do?
So I did Tang Soo Do, which is similar to Taekwondo. Tang Soo Do is a Korean martial arts. It's very similar. We do similar forms to Taekwondo. And then I
Yeah.
also did kickboxing.
All right. So you had a bit of fun then. And
Oh, yeah.
was it full contact, or was it did you have to sort of hold back and all the rest of it?
It was 50-50. So in most classes, it was just nice control, nice discipline. But then when we actually sparred, I was always with the older gentlemen and women. We would have full contact, but we would have on headgear, gloves, and then also shin gear. And then
Mm.
I got into the competitive side of it. But it was more so the calmness and the structure. It wasn't
Yeah.
like the violence. Any real martial artists are usually a very calm person. It's
Yeah.
not like, no offense to MMA in the States, but MMA in the States is just like, oh, yeah, alpha male, oh, testosterone. It's just like all aggressive. But real martial artists that learn at a
Yeah.
dojo, they're all very calm and humble people. So it's
Yeah.
not just looking for the next fight.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's easy to get into a fight. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to do that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's knowing what to do once you're into a fight to stop it and to get out of it. Go
Exactly.
on. So what other sports were you doing then?
So I was running track and playing basketball. And a funny story about sports as well is middle school was also a shift when it came to football or soccer. The
Mm.
reason why is we moved from Germany, and you know how the weather is there. And I was playing soccer outdoors, obviously. We moved to Pensacola, Florida. You have 100% humidity. You have 90-degree weather. So I would pass out on the field playing soccer in middle school. And I was fine, but my body was not adjusted yet because I was playing in the cold in Germany, and I would just be sprinting, and then they would run over, and I would wake up and say, "Hey, I'm fine. My body's just not used to this." So from there, I gradually just started getting more into track and basketball, so my body would adjust because I was like, you know
Mm,
what, this is pointless. I can't just keep passing out. So I literally took about 2 years to fully adjust to play sports in the heat in the summer, and then
yeah,
from there, I got
acclimatise they
much
call
better
it.
at it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
trying to acclimatise. I mean, it's. I've done it a few times. I mean, where they send you off to somewhere nasty, hot and sweaty, and you
Oh
come
yeah.
from come from cold England, and you end up sort of 50-degree heat in Iraq. It takes the fun out of the game.
Oh yeah. 100%. So I had that reality check moment of playing soccer. And from
Mm,
there, I also realized I was like, soccer was fun in Germany, but it was never a true passion. I love martial arts way more just because
yeah.
I also looked at it in regards to team sports is fun, basketball is fun, soccer's fun, but I hated losing if it was somebody else's fault. I wanted to be the one to put all the attention and blame on. And that's why I
Yeah,
loved individual sports like martial arts and then also track. If I get second
yeah,
place, I either got beat, didn't train enough, or I did something. But
yeah.
that's it.
Stepped off on the wrong foot.
Exactly. 100%. Every millisecond counts.
So in the middle school, then, what was your academics like?
So academics was very structured. So the good thing about the school that I went to, it was an A plus school. So in the States, we rate our schools A through F. So I was in an A plus school. So the academics was higher. The teachers were awesome. So I was blessed with good teachers. And I was always in honors classes. Honors classes just means that basically the best way to explain it is if you do standardized tests, whatever your scoring is, then you can get placed into higher classes, normal classes,
Yeah,
or lower, and you need more help. So I was always in the higher classes, and it was just like a natural thing where I really didn't study until I got older, which kicked me in the ass later because I was just used to just passing everything without trying until you get older and you get into college. You're like, oh, gotta study now. But
mm,
that's how middle school was. I was blessed with good teachers, got very serious with sports, but also the reason I was excelling in school and sports is because I was using a lot of the fuel from at home, the quote unquote pain that nobody
yeah,
knew about. I would just fuel that into sports, into my academics, and also the team building. I always loved being there for other people because during that time, I was really getting a reality check that the inner work of both parents was not being done. So I was like, I have to do my own inner work for myself so I don't continue this trend of the family.
mm,
But I always was showing up for others. So basically, the love that somebody would get at home, I would give to others because I wasn't getting that at home. But I would
mm,
never complain though. I would never bash them when I was growing up. It was just more
yeah.
so, hey, here's my situation. What do I get from this? I need to make myself better. And that's how I always looked at it.
Okay, let's move on a little bit. Let's have a look at your junior high. I
Okay.
guess it goes on from middle school, does it? Junior high.
Yes. You got middle school, which is sixth, seventh, and eighth. And then we have high school starts at ninth grade. So the transition in middle school, I mentioned the sports and all that. Also, growing up in the South, I'm mixed. So half black, half German. So you deal with a lot of racist scenarios in the South and in the States. But because I was a martial artist, I was always calm. It never bothered me. So I would have to prove myself to my own people in middle school. I noticed that where I was like, this
Mm,
is interesting. On military bases, nobody really cares about what you are, what you do. And then my friends would be like, what side are you on? I'm like, hey, I'm in the middle. I don't care to fight whoever. It's like, I'm just here for school and sports. I don't care about people's beliefs and views. So it was a reality check. But the shift before middle school to high school is being light skinned and mixed. You had to prove yourself because you looked a certain way. So the way you had
mm,
to prove yourself is you had to fight on the basketball court. And I only had to do it 2 times. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but once they could see that, oh, they called me Johnson. They're like, oh, Johnson, he knows how to fight. Let's not mess with him. Once I had to do that twice, I never had to fight again. Because then
Yeah.
they saw, they're like, okay, he will stand his ground. And then there was like that mutual respect. But in my head, I was like, I don't want to bust this kid's face open, but I have to before all of you jump on me. So it was more so one of
Yeah.
those moments where you had to like prove yourself to the bullies. And then they're like, all right, we're not going to bully him
Yeah.
anymore.
I had a similar thing when I was I think I was about 7 or 8. I had a bully, and I asked the old man what I should do about it. He said, best thing to do something with a bully is give him a good thump. Make sure it's a good one, because if you don't, you're going to get hiding. You probably get hiding
Oh,
anyway. But once you've stood up to him, he won't bother you again. Anyway, following day when in school,
exactly.
he started on to me. I give him a thump. All anybody saw was me thump him fly back into the school pond. I gets dragged off to the headmaster's office. I got 6 of the best. I,
Hey,
I
as long
I
as they
carried
saw it,
that
they
with
don't
me
mess
to
with me
this
anymore.
day.
Oh,
But he
yeah.
never picked on me again, and neither did any other bully.
Awesome. Yeah, that's exactly what happened with me. I got bullied a couple times. And once you stand up for yourself, you embarrass
Yeah,
somebody in front of people, then they're like, all right, he's not the guy to mess with. Don't mess with Tim or Derek.
that's it. So your middle school was a different school to your high school then. So did you take the big yellow bus
Yes.
to get to school? Was it the
Yes.
other side
I
of
took the big
town?
cheese wagon. I took the big cheese wagon to school. So in high school, the school bus would pull up in front of our house in our neighborhood. And then the school was about 15 minutes from us. And then that's really where I didn't get bullied, but that's where you saw like the American movies and all that. Like all that stuff is real. The bullying in the
Yeah.
back of the bus, like all that stuff. Like my German family, they love watching those movies. They're like, is it really like that in school? Does that happen? I'm like, yes, it's exactly like that. It's literally just like the movies. So being the military brat, I realized I was like, okay, I already proved myself to the quote unquote bullies. Now let me just stand up for others. So I was just that friend to people that would stand up, and I didn't have to fight anymore because they knew me. And then I would try to
Yeah.
break up fights and was always the mediator. I was always like, hey, let's settle down. Let's all be
Yeah.
civilized. So I was always like the dad in my group of friends. They would always count on Johnson and be like, all right, if he's here, he's going to control the situation. Where I don't know, it just
Yeah.
came natural. But I think because people that grow up with a crazy family, they're usually become the leaders because they're used to all the madness.
Yeah.
So they're very calm.
So going through your junior high school then,
Yes.
what subjects did you take? Did you have the opportunity to pick and choose what you did?
Yes.
Or did you have a set curriculum that you had to stick to?
So you had both. You had a set curriculum of 5 courses of this particular maths, sciences, all the basic things, English composition, and then you were able to choose 2 or 3 electives. So electives could consist of weight training, wrestling, whatever you wanted to, band, some played instruments. So you had the electives. So my electives at the time were weight training, and the other one was working with the guidance counselor, which basically at my school, I would just bring the slip to the classes like, hey, so and so needs to go see this counselor or this principal or the dean. So I was just always walking around campus because I just didn't want to be around people. I was just annoyed because everybody was immature. So I was like, let me just chill in the principal's office and like do their little paperwork and just go get people. So those were my electives. So besides that, I took the honors classes in high school as well. And
Mm.
so how that works, if somebody's aiming to get a scholarship for college, it basically gives you more points and a higher
Mm.
eligibility to get said scholarship. So I always took those honors classes so that way I could get those things. And then last but not least, in high school, my last elective was Army ROTC, which is Reserve Officer Training Corps. It basically just prepares you for
Yeah.
if you want to go active duty or college. So I always love the structure and the mental challenge of just like the military
Mm.
aspect. I always needed the challenge of mental and physical.
Yeah. So your ROTC then, how was that? How often did you have to turn to for that parade and all the rest of it?
So that was excuse me, that was 2 days a week. So 2 days a week, one day we wouldn't be in uniform and one day we would. So we had ROTC twice a week. We would learn how to march. We would learn how to deal with the rifle. We wouldn't shoot at school, but we would just learn how to assemble and unassemble a rifle, and then just basic marksmanship, like on the weekends, field training. And then also, very important, just the discipline of structure. Getting your uniform together, you have the uniform behind you, getting the
Yeah.
measurements, like learning that at 15, 16, and 17 just really helped the attention to detail. And so those things came natural because my mother was German and I was always doing similar stuff at home, getting everything organized. And with my father being military, being high rank, I would see that. So I always did well in that structure.
Mm.
So with RTC, it just taught me a lot of team building and camaraderie, where I really appreciated being there for others because I could sense when a soldier, a teammate on the sports team, or whoever was going through something, I'd always want to be there for other people and build them up.
Mm. So when you graduated high school, then did you go to prom? Did you go to the prom? Did you take a nice young lady?
Yes, I went to the typical American prom. And the funny thing is, in high school, I never drank or did drugs or anything. So I went there, I danced, and then after that, I just went home. Everybody else went to the next party, to the next party, and did all the. So yeah, I just wasn't into that back then. So like my friends afterwards, they went to all the parties. I didn't, but I did go to prom. So it
Mm.
was just like the movies. I would tell my family, I'm like, yeah, it's just like this, just like that. So it was fun. It was a good experience, but in my mind, I was like, I can't say that I didn't like most of my classmates. I just didn't really think the same way as them. A lot of them were very immature. They just wanted to get drunk and high, and that wasn't
Yeah,
my thing. So in my head, I was just like, hey, I like you guys, but I don't really want to hang out with you outside of school. But great
yeah.
to see you. See you next time. That was me.
Terrific. So what did you do after high school?
So after high school, I was in the Guard. So the U.S. Army National Guard. So I went off to basic training. And then from there, I also got an Army scholarship for college. So dealing with that, you first go to training and then you get placed in your school. So after I did that training, which is about 3 to 4 months, I then went to college. And in college, that's where we were in RTC. And the only difference there is you just have a more rigid structure and scholastic upholding that you have to keep to have your scholarship.
Mm.
So that was the main transition because the Army, they paid for college.
So did you go to West Point?
No, I went to University of West Florida. So there's three ways somebody can become an officer. They can go to West Point, they can do ROTC at college, or they can go active duty, non-commissioned officer, and then do their degree online and then go to officer candidate school. So those are the three ways then. But I went to University of West Florida.
Aha. So during college, then what was your major?
My major was exercise science. I always loved the body and anatomy. So during school, some 3 days a week, I would have ROTC. The rest of the classes were related to science and anatomy. And then also in the gym at our college, I was a personal trainer. So I would train all the students and then I would train at a local gym. So that way I could train people privately because at the time you could only do certain things in the school gym. There's certain training modalities, but at the private gym, I could have them do whatever where they got better progress. So that was me. It was army mode, fitness mode, coach mode, and then class where I was just doing everything.
So you managed to get the scholarship, so that paid for your university, and then you was
Yes.
working as well, so that brought in a few bits of pocket money.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
and at the end of your college, how long did you do?
So I did 4 years. So from 2008 to 2012. And then from there, I went military for a few years. So like
Mm.
went active duty from there. Because at the time you had different options after ROTC. You could do guard, which would be you have your monthly drill plus field
Yeah.
training, or if you want to go active duty. And then there's a few other subcategories, but you had options at your disposal. And the better you did on various testing, you could pick and choose what route you wanted to go.
So did you come out at the end of it with a debt you had to pay back for your education, or they paid for it because of the scholarship, and then you went on to active duty, and that's obviously
Yes,
you get
that
paid.
exactly. So got paid. So I had zero debt. I never wanted debt. That's a big reason that I went Army, because I never wanted to be the 9 to 5 slave. I always had that mentality growing up. I was like, I'm not owing Uncle Sam and the government. I'm not doing that. So while my friends were like stressing out about 6 figures in debt, I was like, oh, I have zero and I'm going to start a business. And I just always had this different mentality that I didn't want to go the typical American path.
Mm,
But yes, so the US Army, they paid for college and the certification. So I made sure to take full advantage of it, as in the personal training certifications, any other coaching, nutrition certifications. I made sure that my benefits were able to cover all that. And I just knew that I wasn't going to go long term, as in retire out of the Army. I always saw it as I'm going to use the advantages to get the degree, to get the certifications, and then go into business from there.
mm. So you went um, you went regular full time. So what was
Yes,
your first draft? What was your first posting? Where did they send you?
I was at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I was there for a few months. And then once I got into my job training, which was satellite communications, I was always like the fit tech nerd. I was always on devices, figuring everything out. And I was always very interested in communications, how things work. So fitness wise, I people thought that I was going to go Ranger, special forces, and everything else. But I was already thinking long term. I was like, that stuff seems great, but I don't want to go 20 plus. I already had a
Mm,
vision where I was like, I need to get good at these devices, and soon I'm going to use social media. Like, I just always had this vision of connecting everything. So that's why I went this path. But I was at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, which is also in the South. It's hot as hell.
hmm.
So more areas where you had some good training. And then from there, for my school training for satellite communications, I was in Fort Gordon, Georgia, which ironically was pretty close, not the same base, but pretty close to where I was born at. So it was interesting how things almost came full circle. But
Mm,
those are the two main places I was at. And when you're satellite communications, you have a lot of training missions in various countries, Latin America, South America, Europe, all over. But it's only for a few months, because you
mm.
just have different terrain that you can get used to wherever you go
Yeah.
if you went on deployment.
So how long did you do your signals training for?
So signal training was at least a year. And then from there, you go to your duty station. So my duty station was in Pensacola, Florida, for the National Guard. So basically,
Right.
you had two positions for the National Guard. You had your job of the Army, which is satellite communications. And the other part was you served federal, but you also served your state. So if there's a natural disaster, obviously Florida, we have
Mm.
tornadoes, hurricanes, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
You would go help the local community, give them the food, water, shelter, whatever's needed. So we were always, quote unquote, on call if things like that were to occur.
Mm. So how long did you do regular army then?
So I did 5 years regular Army, and then I did the 5 Army National Guard, which was
All
basically
right.
part time military.
Yeah. So your 5 years regular army, um, you were based out of Pensacola. What was the
Yes.
most interesting place you went to?
Most interesting place, I would say, just because of the memories, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's called Camp Blanding, which is in Florida. It's in the middle of nowhere in Florida. It's actually near a popular prison where a lot of popular serial killers were. So you can just imagine this country place in the middle of nowhere. So there's like this massive prison, and then a few miles down is this training army base. So nobody lives there. It's just a training base. But I have many memories of training schools that we did on that small training base. So that's how I saw it as. It was more so like when you go there for a few weeks or months, and then you go elsewhere. But to me,
Mm.
as a mental challenge and just being a driven person to want to test my body and mind, I love my experiences there. Even though I hated that place, but I loved who I became from those crazy training scenarios at that training base.
Hmm. Did you get any overseas postings?
Only in Central and South America, but we were only there for a little bit. It's like a couple weeks. So you'd go there, set up your satellites, and then you bounce somewhere else. So it was all just training. It's basically exhibition training.
Hmm. Just exercises.
But
Fair one.
yes, exactly.
So, so you finished your 5 years as a regular, and then you went over to the National Guard. So, what are you doing the same sort of thing in the National Guard?
Yes. So it was very similar. So it was satellite communication. So basically, one weekend of the month, we'd always have a training exercise. And then every few months, we would have 2 to 4 weeks training, which is basically you set up a scenario and then we would go out, provide the communications, the internet, the satellite, the radio, and all that. So we were just always on guard and ready. So outside of that, my main job was being a trainer, being a coach. And then also at the time, I was always traveling throughout Florida. So I was still military, but I wanted to get into modeling and acting. So I moved down to Miami. So once a weekend, I'd go be a soldier, and every few months, and then I was still coaching and training, but I was down in Miami at the time. So I always had this vision to still be military, still get stuff paid for, and just like have the government, but still have my free time. So
Fair enough. So, acting, where did that come from? Because you didn't do any sort of theatre work or anything when you was going through college.
no, so I didn't know theater work. It was more so I wanted to get into modeling and get the experience and just travel. Because I was always told as a kid I should. And at first I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But then the more I learned about it, I was like, hey, this could open up doors. So I just always had a vision that I was going to meet influential people and I was just going to use that as a stepping stone. So I lived in Miami for 4 years and then I would go back and forth with the military training. But there I would do commercial work, like just 2 seconds. I wasn't like famous or anything, but like I'd be in this commercial or some family and friends would see me on this poster. So it was just more so regular things that you would
Mm.
see in stores. But it was a fun experience. And at the time, it was just interesting because in my head, I was like, 3 days ago, I was in my uniform at a shooting range. Now I'm at a set doing a commercial. And then tomorrow morning, I'll drive over here and I'm in a gym at 5 a.m. training a client. So it was just like
Mm.
a fun scenario in my head because I was doing everything that I wanted to and then still trying to figure out what am I going to go all out in. So my parents at the
Yeah.
time, they're like, choose something. And I was like, hey, I'm having fun. I don't have to choose something. This is different. I'm like, this is a different time. I can do a lot of things online as well. So it was a very
Mm.
interesting time where you'd be at field training, go to castings, go to modeling sets, be in the gym training clients, and then be on Zoom doing coaching with somebody. So it was a very interesting time.
Mm. So, bring us up a bit more up to date then. What did you do
Yes.
as a personal trainer? I guess that could tell quite a lot of what you did during lockdown.
Yes, exactly. So during quarantine, that's when everything online, I was already doing online coaching and training, but everything during quarantine skyrocketed because gyms were closed, people didn't know what to do, but also I had life coaching certifications. So a lot of alcoholism went up, drug abuse, spousal abuse, like a lot of negative things skyrocketed, which the media was not talking about. They were just
Yeah.
talking about being sick and getting vaccinated. I looked at it as more so the gym is closed, outdoors by the beach. There's a barricade over the pull up bar. I can't use a pull up bar that's by the beach. McDonald's is open and the liquor store is open. And I was like, huh. So you want me eating a Big Mac, going to get a bottle of whiskey and going home to watch the news and being drunk and like depressed. So like I just had this reality moment where I was like, I need to help more people because
Yeah.
people are going to go into a dark place. So that's what inspired me about it. So I saw quarantine more as a how can I show up better for others? So since everything was online, I would make sure that we had calls set. So I use Zoom every day. And so that's when clients and I would dive deep into whatever they wanted to work on. Maybe it was their own negative self talk. Maybe they were drinking too much. Maybe they had aggression, whatever it was. But everybody would receive workouts in my private training app. And then, two, on our calls, we would always dive deep into the topics of what they want to improve upon. But that was a blessing. So, like, nobody knew the quarantine was coming, but I always felt like the internet and social media would make everything blow up. And it was a blessing in disguise.
Hmm. So bring us right up to date then. What are you doing nowadays?
Okay, so nowadays I mainly do coaching. So I help individuals get to their fitness goals. That's one type of client. And other clients is more so personal coaching. So an example could be public speaking. If he or she has a fear of public speaking or wants to get better to get a promotion, or somebody has stress and anxiety or family trauma that they grew up with, I help them identify those patterns, break those patterns so they can thrive and not just feel like they're surviving or barely making it. So that's mainly what I do now is coaching, fitness coaching and life coaching.
Wow. So if somebody wanted to get hold of you to get them to get your assistance, how would they get hold of you?
So the easiest way would be to go to a website. It'll be fitwithderick.com, or just find me on social media. So on Instagram, Instagram's my favorite app. Everybody has their own, but it is Fit with Derick 2. And on there, I just show my daily routine and I just show clients winning their transformations, body and mind. So it's just all informative social media content that's going to make somebody think or inspire them.
Wow. Well, Derick, thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's
I appreciate it,
fascinating.
Tim. Thank you. Thank you.
No, you're most welcome. If you want to hang about for a tick. Well, that's Derick. So if you want a personal trainer, if you want a life coach to give you some tips and stuff like that, Derick's your man. So until the next one, TTFN. Ta-ta for now.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.